Hello and welcome to the Public Square, a show that explores public affairs and religious liberty issues that affect our nation and beyond. I'm your host, Paul Goodridge, and I serve as the Public Affairs and Religious Liberty Director for the South Central Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, located in Nashville, Tennessee. In each episode, we'll talk to people who are on the front lines of the fight for civil and religious liberty. My goal is to inform about issues that directly and indirectly have an impact on everyday life, ignite meaningful thought and reflection, inspire my audience to action, and integrate faith principles in how we relate to others. Our show today picks up from where we left off on our last show, looking at the state of America, but more importantly, examining how we got here and what history can teach us about what is going to come and where we are headed. And so, as usual, I thank you for joining. I invite you to subscribe, to like, and to share so that more people can be informed about what we do. So, again, thank you for joining us, and let's meet in the public square. I have two guests with me today. The first guest is Dr. Marcia Burden Tiggs, who serves as Director of Pre Law and Legal Studies, as well as the Honors Program Director at Oakwood University. And then we also have Dr. Dr. Timothy Golden, who is a visiting professor of philosophy at Whitman College. And so, Dr. Burden Tiggs and Dr. Golden, welcome to the public square.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pastor Goodridge. I'm very blessed to be here. I'm sure Doctor Marcia is too. So thank you for
Yes.
having us.
Well, thank you for being willing to be had. Okay, so let's dive into this. And I want to begin by allowing both of you to give somewhat of an opening statement. So, when it comes to the present conditions of America today, what do you feel are the issues that are most alarming, or what do you feel has changed the most over the recent years? And we'll begin with you, Dr. Burden, in terms of ladies first.
Okay, thank you, Pastor Goodrich. There's a few things that are very alarming to me. History repeats itself. There's nothing new under the sun, so I can't say that some of these phenomenons are just like, wow, we've never seen this before. But the manner in which they're happening are more alarming than not. The first that's most alarming for me is the court system. And in particular, this fight between your lower level courts versus the United States Supreme Court. And for those who don't know, United States Supreme Court is the highest court of the land. The next thing that's really interesting to me, and Dr. Tim may disagree, and Pastor Gurus, you may disagree too, but one thing that I've noticed is that I have seen a lack of action from both political parties. So I'm seeing now action from the Republicans more than the Democrats. And typically, when we've seen in previous years, we've usually seen this fight, but it's almost like one side is extremely silent while the other is vocal. And I find that very interesting as well. So those are some of the two things. And then the last third thing, which we've all seen, is basically the dismantling of agencies and just the way and manner in which it's happening is also something that is definitely questionable. So I'll leave those three things. Those are some of the things that I see that are kind of make you say,
Hmm. Okay, okay, and we'll definitely dive into some of those particular issues a little later. Dr. Golden, what do you? How is your assessment of where we are now and what are you most troubled by?
Well, I think, thank you, Pastor Goodridge. So I think in order to answer those two questions, I have to, as a Christian, frame all of what is happening in light of the gospel. And
Hmm.
the essence of the gospel of Jesus Christ is that the eternal in God became historical in the person of Jesus Christ. So God has a deep concern for history, if for no other reason than he had to enter it in order to save his people, right?
Hmm.
We are able to experience the joy of salvation because of God's concern with history, and yet we have such an abject neglect of history, and I think there are some reasons for that. Let me just further frame this by saying that
We've
us
lost your audio. Okay.
just how important history is. And one of those is that when you go take a walk on a sunny day, the sun that warms your body is not, it's the warmth that left the sun 8 minutes ago. So we are literally saturated in history. We walk in it, we talk in it, and that's an object lesson from God to show us how important all of this is. Now, I'm of the opinion that one of the reasons that we tend to, when I say we, I mean denominationally, and I mean in broader Christendom as well, we tend to deny history because with a recognition of history comes a recognition of responsibility. And when John was exiled on Patmos and penned the words of Revelation 13, 11 through 15, and spoke of that lamb-like beast, or the beast with lamb-like horns that spoke as a dragon, he is referring to the political and social hypocrisy of America, which would proclaim liberty in the abstract and yet deprive people of liberty in concrete legal and social situations. And what I'm talking about
Mhm.
is slavery, right? The Seventh day Adventist Church, I
Mm-hmm.
believe, is inextricably connected to the experiences of African Americans. And so it's no accident that what we're seeing, as Dr. Marcia pointed out, is a dismantling of the federal government. Because when you study history, the federal government has typically been a friend of Black people in the United
Mm-hmm.
States. It was the federal government that was pushing a Reconstruction agenda that included the largest affirmative action attempt in the history of the country. I'm talking about the Civil War amendments, the Freedmen's Bureau, and a number of initiatives that the Supreme Court of the United States, in its post Reconstruction jurisprudence from the slaughterhouse cases all the way up through Plessy versus Ferguson, essentially denied to Black people. So what we are seeing now is there was a white law student who recently wrote a paper at the University of Florida. And in his
Mm-hmm.
paper, he argued that the Constitution should only apply to white people, right?
Mhm.
This is
Mm-hmm.
where we are. And we can try to ignore history all we want, but it's going to continue to surface in ways that call us to a reckoning and a sense of responsibility to grapple with a past that we so desperately want to ignore, but that God would have us tend to with fierce urgency.
Mm. Okay. Okay. So you've both set the table very well. So let me go back because I don't want to make assumptions in terms of my audience that I or that we're so let's go back to the founding of America. Okay? The principles on which it was founded, the Constitution, both you are attorneys, the essence of the Constitution. Take us back to, and as best you can, explain to us how America was founded and what principles America was founded on. So we can kind of see, then we'll kind of look into how those principles were challenged, changed, etc., and where we seem to be going now. So either of you can kind of give a brief overview.
Dr.
Dr.
Marcia,
Tim,
I'll defer. I'll defer. Oh, okay. I was going to defer to you, but
I'll defer to you and I'll jump in.
okay. Okay. Well, so I think it's important to remember that although it is fashionable to believe that the American founders were vehement racists and slave owners, there was considerable debate over the question of slavery at the time of the American founding. W.E.B. Du Bois chronicles this in what was his dissertation, and it's titled The Suppression of the African Slave Trade. Um, when I teach African American philosophy to my students, I try to get them to understand that the real failing of the American founders was not that they ignored that slavery was wrong, but that they didn't have the courage to bring it to an end, that they allowed economic interests, in particular the interests of the South, South states like South Carolina and Georgia. In fact, it was a delegate to the Philadelphia Convention, Charles Pinckney, who stood up and told the convention, listen, if you want to get rid of slavery, we'll just turn around and go home, right? And if that would have happened, then you would never have had the Constitution as we know it. There are serious problems with the Constitution's implementation, from the three-fifths clause that said slaves would only count as three-fifths of a person. So, in order to make taxation and representation equal in Congress, there's also the problem of the Constitution allowing the slave trade to continue until at least 1808. So, the Constitution, its execution, is not without its flaws. In the same way that interpretations of the Bible are
Mhm.
not without their flaws. But here's the rub: we don't negate the Bible because of the Hamitic curse. What we say is that there are corrupt interpretations of the Bible. And in the same way, I think we need to commit ourselves to the Constitution and apply a similar principle, which is the Constitution, in theory, according to its text, right, is not corrupt. There are bad actors, right?
Mhm.
Justice Roger B. Taney, who wrote the Dred Scott decision. You can throw every American founder in there, but that's just like the Hamitic curse. You can't allow the corruptions of people to affect the nature of the founding document, because if you do, then you give in to the logic of Dred Scott. And if the logic of Dred Scott is true, then the Constitution doesn't apply to Black people.
Mhm.
Then we're all in trouble, right? Then every time you get pulled over by the police, if you're Black, the Fourth Amendment somehow doesn't apply to you, right? So now we're in trouble. So what I'm saying is, I understand the pull because of the problems at the American founding to uh, to condemn the founders, and we should condemn them, right? But we also have to understand that the document itself is there and it's installed, or we at least have to believe it is installed to protect everyone. Because a world in which Black people don't have constitutional rights is a world that no one wants to have. And the other point that I'll make is that historians tell us that America was founded twice, once in 1776 and again in during Reconstruction, right? The real
Yeah.
embarrassment of America as a nation is that we had to amend the Constitution 3 times to include Black people. The 13th Amendment to end slavery, the 14th Amendment to guarantee citizenship, which now is called into question, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the
Mhm.
courts. So, and then the 15th Amendment to guarantee the right to vote. May I just say that this young white guy at the University of Florida, the law student, he said that Black people should not have voting rights under the Constitution, right? So we're when America's history, I think, is somewhat misunderstood, and it has to be rightly understood in order to secure a present that will enable us to move forward. And beyond all of that, it shouldn't surprise anyone that we're seeing so many problems with legal challenges to the president's authority because the president of the United States is a convicted felon who has made himself an exception to the law and thus made himself something of a miracle because that's what a miracle is, right? It's an exception to the law, and the president, through the exercise of his sovereignty, has essentially, with the help of the Supreme Court, has basically just freed himself to do whatever he wants, and
Mm-hmm.
and we're in a difficult place now because of that.
So going back past the Goodrich question, when we talk about the Constitution, we're talking about the supreme law of the land, a document that gave us order and structure to become what we are now, a federal republic. You got to think of the people who were considered the founders of this country, where they came from. They came from a system that was run by a king, a queen, by the church, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they wanted a document that said not one single person will have autonomy in how we function. But at the same time, you see, and history shows us that a lot of the principles from which they came, they brought into America. So, although the thought process was to be different, to be a form of government that had checks and balances, that had that separation where one person solely didn't have all of the responsibility, all of the control of the entire country that they were building, they still had, though, the learnings of the Church of England, the learnings of how a family or a person can wield their power over the people. And so the document was intentionally left open-ended because of that struggle, because of the struggle of saying, okay, we don't want one person in charge, but yet and still, we really don't want the people in charge. We just want it to be different. We don't know exactly how it's going to play out, but we feel that everybody should have a right. Everybody should have freedom to practice their religion as they choose to. Everybody should have freedom to live their life. But yet and still, we still want to have certain taxes. We still want to have our wealth. We still want to be better from which we left. And so that's why you have all these amendments, because as time continued, it said, well, wait, the founders really, in essence, were just thinking about themselves and their families. They didn't take in consideration anybody else that could potentially come into the country. And so what Trump has understood is that this document is not concrete, even though it's the supreme law of the land. There are loopholes to this document. And as Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Tim stated, he is a felon. So a person like that is like, well, so who cares about a document, right? Who cares about the law? I don't care. Let's do whatever we want. What's scary though, Pastor Goodrich, and this is what we need to look out for, is that essentially the Constitution is losing its legality. And that's something that has never happened until now. And I know you're going to get into this
Mhm.
more, but that's the problem that is very scary. Because if we have the founding document of this country lose its legality, then guess what? We can have new founders.
Mhm.
Yeah, and just to follow up on what Dr. Marcia said, what she said was so important because what is happening now before our very eyes with the Supreme Court's so-called shadow docket is scary.
Yes.
And
Yes.
here's what the shadow docket. So the Supreme Court hears cases on two tracks, right? They
Mm-hmm.
hear the cases that we all think about, the ones that are decided that usually come out at the end of June, just happened a
Mhm.
few weeks ago. But then throughout the year, the court gets a series of emergency petitions. These
Yes.
emergency petitions, for instance, people challenging President Trump's executive orders, right? You have a lot of lower court judges that have come out and said, we're going to stop the president from doing that. And then what ends up happening is the president's lawyers appeal and it gets to the Supreme Court. And rather than the Supreme Court do something sensible, like say, well, this executive order says the president is going to fire, you know, 85,000 people from the Department of Agriculture, right?
Mhm.
We can't allow that to happen. We're going to stay the executive order until the case is over. What's now happening is you have a majority of the justices on the Supreme Court essentially overturning the status quo and allowing for these firings to continue, right?
Mhm.
Which is basically has the Supreme Court has turned into President Trump's private legislature. This is the
Yeah.
work of Congress, right? Isn't it interesting that we're seeing all of this stuff go on with immigrations, deportations, brown people being deported, National Guard being deployed? All Congress needs to do is revive the legislation that almost made it to President Biden's desk, and Trump can sign it. That was bipartisan legislation, but Donald Trump needs to maintain the crisis. So he has to have Congress continue to not do anything. And then his logic is we'll just keep appealing to the Supreme Court and they'll just let us do what we want in the meantime. Meanwhile, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson is essentially the lone voice, a black woman, the lone
Mhm.
voice calling the presidential administration and, more importantly, calling the Supreme Court itself to task and saying, how can you allow this measure of executive authority when the litigants have not even had the opportunity to fully brief and argue the cases? These are
Right.
preliminary rulings, right? And
Yeah.
so the
Yeah.
powerful thing about Justice Jackson is that she's not so much writing for today's audience, she's writing for future generations to see just how dangerous this is. And I for one, am terribly afraid that the Supreme Court is on the verge of doing what it always has done, which is become complicit with the will of the executive and allow the status quo to be destroyed in the process.
This would be a good time because I know that in the news very recently there's a a viral clip uh, by Stacey Brown. Sorry, excuse me, Stacey Adams, dealing with the 10 steps to democracy. And I just want to, just for our audience sake, I just want to show what those 10 steps are, and then kind of have you, because we seem to be talking about this, and it seems to be playing itself out right now. So Stacey Adams, based on work by Kim Schleppel, says that the first step is you start with a free and fair election. And so the individual is elected, but then the idea is that will probably be the last, hopefully, election that there will be. Then you begin to cement power by exceeding the bounds of executive power. So, with executive orders that you may not necessarily have the authority to do that, but you will keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and then you will weaken competing powers, whether it's the Congress or whether it's the judiciary, which, and by weakening them, you take on to yourself more and more power to issue more, whether it's executive orders or to push your agenda. Then you got the government, which seeks is in place by protections. It's in place to provide equity. That's why we see this idea um, doing away with DEI, etc., and all of these um, uh, organizations that are there to protect a number of different classes of individuals. And uh, not only do you got the government, but you fire individuals and replace them with loyalists, people who are more loyal to you than to the Constitution, to the established norms of how we function. Then there's the fear of discrediting the media, because if the media is the one that is saying, "Hey, this is wrong. Hey, there's something." That's not right happening here. But when you discredit the media, then people don't know who to trust. They don't don't question, but they start to accept whatever is being promoted and promulgated by the individuals or the entities that is trying to assert more and more power. Then you find a scapegoat, uh, somebody to blame, which, and we see this in terms of our deportations, in terms of immigration policies, even how we relate to the world, in becoming more and more isolationist, withdrawing our support. um, the reason why we're in this situation is because we're helping everybody else and we're not taking care of ourselves. But then you target civil society, those entities again that are there to keep things moving, to keep things in check, to keep things fair and equitable. Um, the step number 9, incentivize private violence, in terms of make it so that these organizations, these entities that are supposed to protect us, that are supposed to protect, democracy, etc., you now find that they are overstepping their authority and they're overstepping their sphere of where they should operate, which brings about a sense of fear, a sense of um, uh, insecurity. And so finally, you can then do away, step 10, with elections, because people aren't really either going to bother to vote because their voting rights have been taken away, or they feel that it doesn't make a difference because nothing's going to change, or people are afraid to run against those in power, etc. And so we move from a democracy to an autocracy. And Doctors Golden and Marcia Brown, excuse me, Bird and Tig, everything that you've said so far has just laid itself out, and we can see the progression that is happening currently. And we've seen some of the danger of this in the past with other democracies, or even at certain times in um, American history. What's your response to this?
So, so a few things. So one, I lean more towards we're looking more like a competitive authoritarianism. And And it is aligning with autocracy as well. I mean, essentially, in this particular type of political sphere, you have your democratic elections. So we have elections, right?
Mhm.
But basically, the ruling party or the leader, the people who has the majority, they kind of tilt the playing field in their area, lamb like beast, right? That it seems one way to everybody else. When you look at
Mhm.
Trump, when you look at what happened, even with the election, it seemed one way to everybody else. This is a man, he's for the people, he's for the working class. He's going to uh, undo all of the elite things that Biden did and make sure that the average American is better off, has everything they need. Some people even believe that they're going to get another stimulus check, right? Where
Mm.
he's going to make everything wrong with America right again. And right America for the majority is white America, because they are number wise still the majority. However, that's not America, right? And so it sounds great. He has people rallying around him. But then when he gets in office, within the first 180 days, all hell breaks loose. You're losing your insurance, aka Medicare and Medicaid. You're
Mhm.
losing your jobs. He's firing everybody who had the dream job of the federal government. You get a notice
Mhm.
that you're fired randomly by some entity that he created that's not even existing within our governmental system. He then tells you, well, I don't know what's going to happen to you because your child drowned in a flooding that you didn't even know about. I don't know what's going to happen to you. I don't know what's going to happen to your family. I'm not even that interested in it. I'm going to wait and stall to come and visit you because I have more important things to do. What are the more important things to do? Oh, I have to have meetings behind closed doors with the very same people that I criticize publicly as the
Mhm.
elite, right? And so within competitive authoritarianism, it appears as one thing. It appears as a champion for the majority. Make America white again. It's going to be great. All of these people and their energy and their electric cars and their stuff about the society and them wanting to help people. No, people should help themselves. I mean, you even got people like Dr. Oz saying that people shouldn't get insurance unless they're trying to volunteer to get a job. People who are disabled, right? So you have all of these people who are like, yes, 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 but they're not realizing behind closed doors that this is nothing but a manipulation tactic. And so I am going to then, under this type of political system, I'm going to go after people that traditionally aren't gone after. I'm going after the schools. I'm going after universities, and I'm going after the heavy hitters. I'm coming for Harvard. I'm coming for Yale. I'm coming for Stanford, University of Chicago, Columbia. These top schools who let these people in who shouldn't be in this country. I'm coming for them, and I'm going to remove millions of dollars because I can. I'm going to dismantle the Department of Education. I'm going to strip the air and traffic control system on the federal level. I'm going to fire the people in the FBI and over the CIA. Heck, I'm even going to replace the Treasury because he's not doing what I say. And so you see all of these things happening in this abuse of power, but at the same time, because it's not directly affecting you, so you think, then it's like,
Mhm.
oh, that's what those people get. They had it coming for them. No, it's going to affect you, because if this person is removed, guess what? Another plane is going to crash and your relatives are going to die. When this person is fired, guess what? The national weather system is going to be severely understaffed, so they can't get the warnings in time to ensure that your child isn't drowning
Mhm.
from accidental rain. Oh, when the fire comes and destroys your home because this FEMA doesn't even exist anymore, what aid is coming to you, right? So these are real issues that affect us. And going back really quickly, and I'm going to stop to Dr. Tim's point, When you look at this shadow docket, and that's why I made my statement earlier about the court, it is so scary. When Trump finished his first term, there was 11 cases that were brought in under this emergency docket. Trump is in the first 180 days of his second term, and he's brought 18, and they've all been a win for him. With no reasoning. Half of them have no actual reasoning as to why it was granted by the court. Now that is a problem, and that is troubling.
You know, there is I think, I've always thought that the most compelling verse of scripture is found in the book of Esther, chapter 7, verse 10. And it simply says, and Haman was hung on the gallows that he prepared for Mordecai. Think about that for a minute. There is a spirit of Haman. And Dr. Marcia just talked about it. You had a bunch of people last November who voted for Donald Trump precisely because they thought that everything he was talking about doing was going to happen to somebody else.
Yeah.
And now it's
Yes.
happening to
Yep.
them.
Yes.
Right? The spirit of Haman is of unhealthy ambition. It's a spirit that tries to curry favor, demonizing others, not realizing that the grave you're digging for them is your own. And so now you have a lot of people who voted for him who are looking around. They work for the federal government, they're jobless, and they're thinking, I thought he was just going to deport immigrants who were eating domesticated pets, right?
Yes.
People fell for that. And, you know, what Dr. Marcia said is so true. Because when you think about that list of 10 things, in the background of that is a complete collapse of American institutionalism. What do I mean?
Yep.
The first institution to bow its knee to the Baal of Trump was the white Christian church. There were white
Yep.
Christians 30 years ago who would never dream of voting for Donald Trump. They didn't even want to vote for John McCain in 2008 because he had been divorced. And yet you turn around and you vote for someone who has been adjudicated liable of sexual assault and who has been convicted of 34 felonies. So there's a segment of Christendom that has failed Christianity as an institution. You also have, Dr. Marcia pointed out, you have educational institutions that are now starting to capitulate and bow to Trump, right? Because he's going after the ones with the big endowments. And I work at a smaller school, and fortunately, we have not been targeted yet. But the day might come when Oakwood gets targeted, right? And Oakwood doesn't have a $52 billion endowment like Harvard, right? Neither does Whitman College. I'm sure we got a pretty big endowment, but not the size of Harvard. So you get major. You get religious institutions. Now you get educational institutions. Now you have penal institutions. In the midst of all of the federal government's dismantling, Trump has ordered the Bureau of Prisons to resurrect Alcatraz, right? So now we have an emergence of a carceral state in the context of the dismantling of federal government, which was once has historically always been the friend of black people in favor of a resurrection of mass incarceration. So you go across the board. You talk about dismantling the Department of Education. There are parents who have children with disabilities that are no longer going to have access to federal resources, right? You have educational institutions in large American cities, New York, Chicago, LA, Houston, Philadelphia, all these places that are now looking around and they're thinking about how are they going to support their schools, right? Because the money has
Hmm.
dried up. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court of the United States, through the shadow docket, is allowing this to continue
Mm-hmm.
without issuing a substantive ruling. And Congress doesn't have to do anything. And it is the height of Machiavellian politics, right?
Hmm.
Throw the
Mm-hmm.
stone and then hide your hand, right? It is a project of dishonesty, and I'm just so disappointed that we're traveling on this road. And I really wish, to go to Dr. Marcia's point earlier, you know, say what you want about Donald Trump, but he has no problem poking the bear or pushing the envelope. And sometimes I wish I would see the other side do some things that are similar. I would love to see Hakeem Jeffries try to push a bill through the House that would end qualified immunity. Is it going to work?
Mm-hmm.
No, but that's
Hmm.
okay. At least you put the other side on the defensive. At least you force media to ask Republicans in Congress, why are you opposed to ending qualified immunity? Why are you opposed to ending voting rights? I would like to see some gumption, some real force, some kind of strategy coming from the other side to put the administration on the defensive, because right now all that's happening is a lot of reacting, a lot of pearl clutching, a lot of gasping. Oh, I can't believe Trump did that. We're well past that now.
Hmm.
Well
People
Hmm.
are
past.
numb. People are numb today. And I just want to say one last thing. The other institution that has fallen, and I think this is our own fault, is media. I remember years
Oh yeah.
excited about the democratization of media. It used to be you had to be a journalist in order to be believed. But there are
Yes.
people who follow the likes of Joe Rogan, right? People who Dan Bongino is now second in Cash Patel. These people were social media superstars and far right wing ideologues, and now they're in positions of government and people listen to them,
Yeah.
unqualified, incompetent, right? There is some value in legitimate journalism. And the media institutions, the educational institutions, the religious institutions falling down, combined with the carceral institutions being resurrected, bespeaks a terrible future in terms of where we're headed.
And Pastor Goodrich,
So
before you go
yeah.
on, I
Hmm.
I just want to throw in really, really quickly. I don't think that we can wrap America in a box. I think America is its own case study. And I'm going to leave that there and I'll let you continue.
Okay. Okay. So from what I'm hearing within all of this, there are unintended consequences, but I also believe there are intended consequences with all of these cuts, all of the firings, with all of the downsizing, with the with everything that's happening under the guise of waste, fraud, and abuse, which basically just a catch-all for I just want to do what I want to do, and emphasize whatever I want to emphasize. Um, it the unintended consequence when you fire people, that means that they don't have an income, and when they don't have an income, that means that um, they are now uh, at the mercy of how are they going to survive, whether it's food wise, whether it's housing wise, whether it's just taking care of themselves, and so they need assistance. But then when you um, um, what do we dismantle these systems and these organizations that are there to provide assistance, then what are you left with? You're left with desperate people who are now forced to do desperate things. And if they're forced to do desperate things, sometimes those things are not going to be legal. And so if they are illegal and they do illegal things, now they get run afoul of the law. And then now you're talking about incarceration. And so you're creating um unnecessary burdens on society because you leave people with no option. And I think part of the end goal, the intended consequence, is to create chaos so that you can turn around and step in to say, I'm the only one that can bring, order to this chaos. Trust me, uh, d- s- submit to me, and then I will, you know, and then you just create even further chaos because now they are just able to do whatever they want to do with no checks or balances. Um, it's again, Dr. Burden, you mentioned that history repeats itself. And we've seen this playbook over and over and over again. And even throughout the history of America, we've seen attempts to do all of these things, but maybe on a one-off basis. But now it just seems an avalanche of let's do all of this at once, and just like throwing something to the wall and seeing what sticks. And so
And
that's what I
yeah,
see.
Well,
Yeah.
well, that's well,
yeah.
that's where I have to disagree. It's not random. We were told this was going to happen, and I don't
Hmm.
understand why nobody believed it. They literally wrote
Well, I think,
Project 2025.
yeah, I think I agree with you, Dr. Marcia. What I will say is that um, we were told this was going to happen, and what we are living through right now is what happens when racism makes you stupid. I am actually hearing now in certain corners of the internet that are black that black people are supporting Trump in his desire to end birthright citizenship because they are taking scapegoats from that
Hmm.
top 10 list, right? What Trump has succeeded in doing is scapegoating immigrants to such an extent that now you have black people turning
Right.
against uh, immigrants of color, saying, well, wait a minute. The 14th Amendment birthright citizenship was only intended to apply to the children of slaves. It was not intended to apply to people who entered the country illegally, right?
Mm.
And make no mistake about it. The reason the Republican Party is now the party of the working class is for the same reason it briefly became the party of the working class under Ronald Reagan, which is the historical move people of color against one another and to turn poor whites against people of color by
Hmm.
pushing the rhetoric that these people of color are taking your jobs. These people of color who are immigrants are eating your pets. Whatever lie you can conjure, you have to do it because the playbook has always been to divide the poor.
Yes.
And now
Yes.
you have whites, no matter how poor they are, they can look themselves in the mirror and say, at least I'm not black and at least I'm not an illegal. And the
Hmm.
whole MAGA mantra it appeals to them and it makes them feel good. It makes them feel a part of the country. Why? Because Donald Trump is the ultimate anti Obama. Obama was competent. Trump is incompetent. Obama um, had integrity. Trump is a convicted felon. Obama is black. Trump is white. Right? This is the real problem. So in addition to the institutional failures, the playbook has always been turn poor people against each other and then the rich will be able to do whatever they want. Think about this for a minute. Can you imagine 35 years ago, Ronald Reagan or Bill Clinton? Imagine Bill Clinton calling in a black billionaire, Reginald Lewis. You call in Reginald Lewis and you have him do what Elon Musk did with
Mm-hmm.
Doge. That would never happen. And you know
Yes.
why it would
100%.
never happen? Because of race. That's why it wouldn't happen. And it continues to be the elephant in the room. Why is it that we are deporting our brown brothers and sisters without due process and simultaneously allowing white South Africans into the country and fast tracking them to citizenship based on fabricated claims of
Mhm.
white genocide in South
Yes.
Africa? I
It,
mean,
Yes.
it's
this is happening right before our very eyes. We have all of these failures, right? And what we need to talk about is their deep connection and their deep roots in American racism and white supremacy. And for anybody that thinks that's not biblical, all you got to do is read Revelation 13:11 through 15. The Spirit has no other way to describe the hypocrisy of the United States than as a nation or a kingdom that has good ideas, lamb like horns, but will speak like the devil himself.
Mm.
and at the end of the day, when you think about it and you say, well, why is this happening? Why are people feeling this way? It's comfortability. It doesn't affect me. I'm comfortable. You know, black women are the most educated minority in the world, right? When we look at wealth and when we look at what we have and what we don't have in comparison to previous years, it's that privilege to say, I'm good. That's y'all's problem. But like
Mm-hmm.
one of my relatives said, if he's down the street at your brown brothers and sisters' house to collect them, he could be at yours next. And that's the misconception, and that is the problem that I have with our community. Where are our leaders who are standing up, who are fighting this in different ways and manners? Everybody wants to get on and make it a popular thing and make it a popular narrative, but where is the actual movement? Where is the actual work? And when we look at the church, because I know that's an issue as well, we have a
Mm-hmm.
call and a duty to be our brother's keepers. And our church, especially the black church, we understand oppression. We understand what has our history. So just because it seems, again, lamb like, it seems that you're okay, that your relative's okay, the reality of it is that's just simply not true. We're headed towards a nation that will have two types of people: your one
Yes.
percenters and your poor. There will
Uh,
be no
so
middle class.
yeah. So I agree with you, and what you're saying reminds me of a famous poem by Martin Mueller. Um, excuse me, Niemöller, and I want to put that up to talk about it. It's called "First They Came." Um, it says, "First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I'm not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I'm not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me."
Mm.
This is a powerful, um, warning to us today in terms of our responsibility, not just as Black people, but even as Christians, as especially Seventh day Adventist Christians who know the playbook, who know what's going to happen, who have been, who have understanding of prophecy to know how all of this plays out. We have a responsibility to speak up and to speak out and to speak on behalf of those who cannot speak for themselves, who are being marginalized, who are being um, trampled on and abused, etc. It's interesting. I want to go back to something that you had said, Dr. Golden, in terms of basically the tension when you look the founding fathers and you look at the issue of racism and slavery, the tension between economics and slavery. The reality that slavery kept going because the desire for economics and wealth out outperformed that, and we're kind of seeing now where the desire for wealth and for power that comes with it is uh, um, uh, outweighing the idea of trying to do good and take care of people. And what you're going to be left with, if the desire is to grab power above all else and at the expense of everything else, you're going to be left with individuals who basically will be in slavery. They'll be enslaved economically, they'll be enslaved socially, um, they'll be dependent, and it's just history repeating
The,
itself.
the people who are standing on the hill in the end, who the Bible says will say, "Lo, this is our God, we have waited for him and he
Hmm.
will save us." The remnant of a remnant, I guess you could say, according to Sister White. Those people will be occupying the socio-economic political status of Black people. They will have
Mm,
been scapegoated. They will have been um, they will have been economically oppressed. No, right? And so
mhm,
the idea or the paradigm of oppression for every Seventh Day Adventist, right? Whether you are white or Black. In fact, if you are a Seventh Day Adventist in the United States, whether you realize it or not, when it comes to your ability to get Sabbath exemptions in the workplace, you are
mhm,
doing so based on a law, the Civil Rights Act, that, among other things, ended Jim Crow. And the
mhm,
church that opposed the protest movements of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, because the General Conference was opposed to the church, to local churches getting involved in protest movements. And fortunately, there were Black pastors who had enough courage to defy those directives, right? Because they felt a deeper connection to the oppression of their people. That was able to continue. But here's the part that bothers me, is that so many of us, we all benefit from the civil rights struggle, but we
mhm.
essentially reap where we have not sown. And that is the height of hypocrisy for me, right?
Yeah.
You can't tell me that there's something, that it's okay to oppose the protests that led to the legislation that you all benefit from, right? And
Mhm,
so, with that in mind, what I want to say, Pastor Goodridge, is that the kind of work that we're talking about, the kind of work that Adventist churches have to do, it has to come from the local church level. Local churches have to liberate themselves. And I'm not saying become rogue or leave the conference or anything like that. What I am saying is that we have had historically within our denomination a kind of top down mentality
mhm.
when it comes to social action. We look for the statement from the
Yes.
GC, we look
Yes.
for approval of the world church. If you happen to live, if you happen to, your local church happens to be in a position to help people, you don't need to ask anyone within the denomination's permission to
Permission to
carry
do
out
that.
the mandate
Yes.
of Christ. You
Yes.
don't,
Yes.
right? My prayer is that local churches will empower themselves enough to connect themselves to the communities in which they exist and determine that through whatever means they have at their disposal, they will use that to be a blessing to oppressed people in that community. And I think
Amen.
if local churches would take stock in that kind of determination, I think we would see a great work.
Yeah.
I
And
I
and sorry.
Go
Yeah.
ahead, Pastor.
No. As we're starting to land the plane, you're leading us where I want us to go in terms of, okay, we know the problems, we know what history is teaching us, we know what prophecy is telling us. In the meantime, what do we do? Do we just throw our hands up and say, well, it's going to happen, nothing I can do about it? Or do we still try to, proverbially tilt against the wind and in whatever way we can make life better, easier, relieve some burden, some issues, make some effort in terms of people around us? And you, Dr. Golden, you've talked to us from a church perspective. Dr. Burden, I want you to finish your thought, but I also want you to kind of address this from a political perspective, or at least our civic duty perspective.
Yeah, so you actually led to my next point. The Bible is split in two ways. The two great commandments: love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, mind, strength, and love thy neighbor as thyself. You treat people
Hmm.
how you want to be treated. Do you want to be stripped from your home and put in a detention camp in the middle of nowhere and then exiled to some country that you've never been to, with no access to cell phones, with bad food, with separation from your family? Would you want that to happen to you? So why is it okay if that happens to somebody else? Because it's not. There's always this argument that um, politics has no place, especially in Adventism, right? And
Hmm.
shout out to your division, the Paul division, and I'm wearing my shirt, Faith in Politics. But when we look at it, yes, there should be a separation between church and state. Agree, right?
Yeah.
We want that. We want the government to be the government, and we want the church to be the church. But at the same time, we do have a civic duty to our neighbor. Who is your neighbor? Your neighbor is the next human being, irregardless of
Hmm.
their race, irregardless of their ethnicity, irregardless of their status. What did you do to be your brother's keeper? When they were in prison and wrongfully incarcerated, did you speak out about it? When they were
Hmm.
hungry and didn't have access to food, didn't have access to water, did you help them? Did you provide for them? Did you fundraise for them? When they were orphaned, did you support them? When they're widowed without two incomes in the household, were you there for them? Because when you look at it, this country's principles at the end of the day are biblically associated. I even teach in my common law class about Deuteronomy and the Constitution. And so you see that Jesus is our advocate. He's the attorney. He's advocating on our behalf right now. When we look at what's happening in this country, in this horrible political climate, we see the injustices that are happening to our brothers and sisters alike. And so we do have a responsibility and a duty to help. Helping looks different for different people. Some people not be comfortable like me and Dr. Golden to come on a podcast and to voice their opinions strongly. But then they might be comfortable to go to a rally that talks about the injustices of what is happening to people in ICE raids. Or they might be comfortable to come out of their own pockets and on their own funds and financially support families who have been displaced from
Mhm.
their
Mhm.
homes, and support people who no longer have Medicaid and Medicare and can't afford hospital costs and different needs that they have. So everybody has their part to play. I don't think that everybody's part is going to look the same.
Mhm.
I just want people to actually participate. Get in the
Yes.
game. Don't sit from the sidelines and say, well, this is not my game. I'm not going to be a part of it. When in actuality, it is yours. If you profess to love the Lord Jesus Christ with all your heart, then you're commanded to love your neighbor. The real issue, Pastor Goodrich, though, when we come to our civic duties, do we really understand America? Do we
Mhm.
understand the government? Do we understand the law? And it's sad to say, but the majority of people that live in this country don't have a clue. I give a
Yes. Yes.
citizenship test in my class every year, and it amazes me how students are just struck in awe by the questions that people who want citizenship in our country have to go through, and they don't even know some of the basic answer and responses to our government, our
Mhm.
foundation, people that were born into this country, irrespective. I've taught white, black, Hispanic, Asian, Native American. I've taught all kinds of students, and they are just astounded as to the rigor of the exam for the country that they live in and answers to
Yes.
questions they should know. And so, yes,
Yes.
we do have a civic duty to participate in this country. Is it going to look the same for everyone? No. But if you are a lobbyist, if you are one who is doesn't mind being out in the public square, go speak, do. Don't just sit and watch this happening and say, well, I'm not going to do anything because Bible prophecy said this was going to happen and
Mhm.
this is just the end. No, we're here for a reason and we still have a work to do. I believe that we're all still alive because we have a work to do. And lastly, I'll
Uh,
say this: Ellen G. White emphasis in gospel workers, that those who teach the Bible in our churches and our schools are not at liberty to unite in making apparent their prejudices for or against political men or measures. We aren't supposed to be prejudiced.
Mhm.
We're not supposed to, even as a church, formally align ourselves with prejudice. We are supposed to be for the good of humanity. And that's what I would like for everyone to really do in these troubling times.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And um, I, I I can't help but think about how we are. Um, when we are silent, when we don't advocate for others, we are really working against our own self interest. I think about Adventism and the health message that we have, and our desire that people live happy, holy, so healthy lives. And the amount of money that we put into our healthcare system, the hospitals that we set up, the clinics that we set up, the programs that we have, whether it's New Start or um, uh, uh, the one from Oakwood University, essentially, um,
Stand out.
promote. Thank you. Stand out. It essentially promoting health, but yet we sit back and say nothing when Medicare and Medicaid is being gutted and eroded. When people are losing their health insurance, how are they going to pay for the very surgeries and life-giving procedures that we are trying to promote in our health within our healthcare system and in our hospitals? It's like when we say nothing, it's like how are people going to financially support the existence of the hospital? It's just.
If you, it's terrible, Pastor. I'll just say this, and I think this needs to be said. If you are the community services coordinator at
Mhm.
your local church and you serve on your local church board, If you are the family life coordinator at your local church and serve on a church board, and I'm using these two as examples,
Mm-hmm.
if you hold either of those positions and in coordination with the pastor, you do not serve on any boards of any community based organizations in and around the church,
Mm-hmm.
then you have work to do, right?
Yes.
See,
Yes.
historically, we have had our local church board is kind of incestuous, right? Like everything
Mhm.
is done for the church, it's turned inwardly.
Yes.
But every representative of every local department needs to be involved with some pre existing organization that is already doing the work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You need to be attending those meetings, and no, you don't need to take tracks and try to convert people. That's not what this is about. This is about humbling ourselves enough to say, hey, listen, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. How can we help? Right? Do
Yeah.
you have a plan? If you're a local church in Los Angeles, do you have a plan? You're the family life coordinator. Do you have a plan to help distressed families whose members have been swept up by ice and taken
Mm-hmm.
away? How are you going to help alleviate that kind of pain or stress and pressure?
Yes.
You know, and
Yes.
if there's no plan for that, then you have work to do. We don't need a statement from the GC or the division or the union or the conference in order to do that kind of work. And as Marcia so nicely put it, the kind of activities you do are going to look different for everybody.
Yes.
Everybody's not going to be able to do the same thing, right? Marcia and I can come on your podcast and do what we do, and that may be our contribution,
Mm-hmm.
right? And Marcia is doing a wonderful job shaping the minds of our young people to go out into courts of law eventually, right? And represent warm-blooded human beings and do these kinds of things. So it's we can't wait for the denomination to do what the local church can do on its own. Let's turn our church departmental structure inside out, and then let's watch the blessings of God come to others through us as we love the neighbor as we love ourselves.
Amen. Amen. Unfortunately, we're going to have to kind of leave it there because we're out of time. But, there's so much food for thought. And the reality is, going back to the theme of the show, what can history teach us about the future? We've seen this before. We've seen this before. And because we've seen it before, it should enlighten us and should um, give us the tools and the ammunition that we need to either slow it down or head it off or stop it completely. But the power is in within us. The information is within us, and we need to gather even more information while we can, because the reality is Jesus is coming soon. Things are winding up. They are going to get worse before they, get better. And when I say better, I'm talking about with the return of Jesus Christ, when all things will be made new. But until then, we have a responsibility to fight for the very till the very end, and to advocate for those who have no voice, who cannot advocate for themselves, who have been stripped of dignity, of um, resources, etc., opportunities. We have a responsibility as a church and as individuals to fight for them, because soon they will come for us. And if we allow everybody else to be taken, there will be no one left to speak for us. Again, I want to thank you for um, coming on the show. I really appreciate it, you giving your time. And we'll be back right after this, where I'll give some closing remarks. Again, I want to thank you for joining us here on the Public Square. We look forward to our next show, which will take place next month in August. But I want to tell you something that's happening in September. This We are part of the Conscience and Justice Council, which is made up of public affairs and religious liberty directors, not only within the United States, but also around the world. And there is a convention that's taking place in Huntsville, Alabama on September the 20, uh, excuse me, September the 24th to the 28th. It will be at the Embassy Suites Hotel. There's a number, the theme is overcoming oppression, biblically dismantling abuses of power. And we've talked about the abuse of power and how it has been permeating through a number of different perspectives. But we want to look biblically, what can we do to recognize what's happening, but more importantly, to be empowered to take action, to with boldness and with the full weight and authority of God, seek ways to dismantle these abuses of power. You see, there's a QR code you can scan. That will give you an opportunity to register, to find out more about this convention. In terms of, you'll see the tentative agenda for the convention. You see some of the presenters here. And so I just want to encourage you to take part in that, to be a part of that, to come to Huntsville, wherever you may be. There will also be an option for you to view online, but there's nothing like being here in person and hearing for yourself and networking with those individuals who are here. So again, I want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank you for taking the time out. Please go ahead, even after this program ends, go ahead and share the link with somebody. Allow them to watch, so they too can benefit from the things that we have shared here, and they can also feel inspired and empowered to go and make a difference in the life of somebody. We have been called to do the work of Christ, to set at liberty those who have been captive from various types of captivity, whether it's from emotional captivity, whether it's physical captivity, whether it's financial captivity, whatever it's political captivity, whatever it is. We have been called to be liberators. We have been called to do the very work of Christ. And I hope that something that you've heard this evening has inspired you to go out and do just that. Again, thank you for joining us, and I'll see you next time in the Public Square.